Hello, my dear students. Today we are going to discuss the story The Paper Menagerie by Ken Liu. This story is a very painful story that has a lot of themes such as immigration, identity and culture, parental sacrifice, emotional toll that it takes on racism, the sense of belonging, quiet sacrifices that the parents make towards their children. So there are a lot of such themes. All the themes will be discussed towards the end of the story. First, let's discuss the story in depth. So make sure you watch this video until the end. Okay, so before we start the story, let's first understand the meaning of the word menagerie. So the literal sense of the word menagerie is a collection of captive wild or exotic animals that are kept for exhibition. But in the metaphorical sense, menagerie means a varied assortment of items. So maybe the author gave the title The Paper Menagerie because the mother makes a varied assortments of paper origami items for her son. And the story includes a lot of elements of magical realism that usually children in the young age feel that everything is magical. So those elements of magic is included here and there in the story. So as we come across that, we will discuss that further. Let's start the story. One of my earliest memories starts with me sobbing. Sobbing is crying. I refused to be soothed no matter what mum and dad tried. Dad gave up and left the bedroom, but mum took me into the kitchen and sat me down at the breakfast table. Can, that means look, she said as she pulled a sheet of wrapping paper from on top of the fridge. For years, mom carefully sliced open the wrappings around Christmas gifts and saved them on top of the fridge in a thick stack. So here, the protagonist is a young boy. He was sobbing and nothing seemed to soothe him or console him. The dad left because there was no way he could soothe, but mom took him to the kitchen and she took one of the wrapping paper. She set the paper down, plain side facing up, and began to fold it. I stopped crying and watched her curious. So the boy who was relentlessly crying stopped because he was curious and he wanted to see what his mother was making with the wrapping paper. She turned the paper over and folded it again. She pleated, packed, tucked, rolled, and twisted until the paper disappeared between her cupped hands. Then she lifted the folded up paper packet to her mouth and blew into it like a balloon. Can, she said. Lahu. Look, a tiger. So through her origami, she had made a tiger. She put her hands down on the table and let go. A little paper tiger stood on the table, the size of two fists placed together. The skin of the tiger was the pattern on the wrapping paper, white background with red candy canes and green Christmas trees. So here the boy saw the creation of his mother and he was enchanted by his mother's ability to make paper animals come alive. I reached out to mom's creation. Its tail twitched and it pounced playfully at my finger. So these are the elements of magical realism that are included in the story because when children are young, they think that all these animals are actually alive. Roarsa, it growled. The sound somewhere between a cat and rustling newspapers. I laughed, startled, and stroked its back with my index finger. The paper tiger vibrated under my finger, purring. Ji Jiao Jezi. So mom said, this is called origami. I didn't know this at the time, but mom's breath was special. Okay, so the little boy was fascinated. He was enchanted by his mother's ability. He considered her magic and considered her special. So, this was his opinion before his thoughts were tainted by society. She breathed into her paper animals so that they shared her breath and thus moved with her life. This was her magic. So here the young boy was really fascinated by how his mother had made a paper animal, which is a tiger, and how she breathed life into it, and he considered it magic. Dad had picked mom out of a catalog. One time when I was in high school, I asked dad about the details. He was trying to get me to speak to mom again. So that means in between there were phases where he wasn't talking to his mom. He had signed up for the introduction service back in the spring of 1973. Flipping through the pages steadily, he had spent no more than a few seconds on each page until he saw the picture of mom. I have never seen this picture, Dad described it. Mom was sitting in a chair, her side to the camera, wearing a tight green silk Shongsam. So Shongsam is the typical dress that Chinese wear. Her head was turned to the camera so that her long black hair was draped artfully over her chest and shoulder. She looked out at him with the eyes of a calm child. So this is how his father met his mother. He selected her through by going through a catalog and he instantly liked her. So the system here by selecting a bride through a catalog is called mail order bride. So how the system really works is men from wealthier and developed nations sometimes seek women from developing regions such as part of Southeast Asia, Eastern Europe and Latin America. So sometimes women from such developing regions have to resort to putting their names in such catalogs and getting married because here marriage provides an opportunity for a better standard of living because maybe they have harsh economic conditions at home or unemployment or difficult situations. So this is their only way to have a better life. So that was the last page of the catalog I saw and he really liked her. The catalog said she was 18, loved to dance, and spoke good English because she was from Hong Kong. None of these facts turned out to be true. So she neither spoke English, she wasn't 18, and she did not love to dance. He wrote to her, and the company passed their messages back and forth. Finally, he flew to Hong Kong to meet her. The people at the company had been writing her responses because she did not know English, right? She didn't know any English other than hello and goodbye. What kind of woman puts herself in a catalog so that she can be bought? The high school me thought I knew so much about everything. Contempt felt good like wine. So, when children are usually in the adolescent stage or like in the teenage state, they have a feeling that they know everything and that they are very intelligent. So, he was saying, what kind of a woman puts herself in a catalog? So, he doesn't know about the difficulties or what conditions his mother had gone through during her childhood. Instead of storming into the office to demand his money back, he paid a waitress at the hotel restaurant to translate for them. So, this shows that the father was a nice guy. She would look at me, her eyes halfway between scared and hopeful while I spoke. She was a very naive girl. And when the girl began translating what I said, she would start to smile slowly. He flew back to Connecticut and began to apply for the papers for her to come to him. I was born a year later in the year of Tiger. So, this was how the husband and the wife met and how the boy was born. At my request, mom also made a goat, a deer, and a water buffalo out of wrapping paper. They would run around the living room while Lahu chased after them, growling. When he caught them, he would press down until the air went out of them and they became just flat, folded up pieces of paper. I would then have to blow into them to re-inflate them so they could run around some more. So this was his imagination of how the various paper animals would play. Sometimes the animals got into trouble. Once, the water buffalo jumped into a dish of soy sauce on the table at dinner. He wanted to wallow like a real water buffalo. I picked him out quickly, but the capillary action had already pulled the dark liquid high up into his legs. The sauce softened legs would not hold him up, and he collapsed onto the table. I dried him out in the sun, but his legs became crooked after that, and he ran around with a limp. Mom eventually wrapped his leg in saran wrap so that he could wallow to his heart's content, just not in soy sauce. So, saran wrap is the cling wrap that we use, the transparent wrap. So, saran wrap is a brand name. Also, Lahu liked to pounce at sparrows when he and I played in the background. But one time, a cornered bird stuck back in desperation and tore his ear. He whimpered and winced as I held him, and mom patched his ear together. So, if you see here, a large part of his childhood was spent playing with these animals and in his world of imagination with them. With tape, he avoided birds after that. So it also shows that he really enjoyed playing with all these animals. And then one day I saw a TV documentary about sharks and asked mom for one of my own. She made the shark, but he flapped about on the table unhappily. I filled the sink with water and put him in. He swam around and around happily. However, after a while, he became soggy and translucent and slowly sank to the bottom, the folds coming undone. I reached in to rescue him, and all I ended up with was a wet piece of paper. Lahu put his front paws together at the edge of the sink and rested his head on them. Ears drooping, he made a low growl in his throat that made me feel guilty. So his mother had made a shark, but unfortunately, after going into the water, the paper had become all droopy and wet, and it made him feel guilty. Mom made a new shark for me, this time out of tin foil. The shark lived happily in a large goldfish bowl. Lahu and I liked to sit next to the bowl to watch the tinfoil shark chasing the goldfish. Lahu sticking his face up against the bowl on the other side so that I saw his eyes magnified to the size of coffee cups, staring at me from across the bowl. So this was his beautiful life until then, where he enjoyed. So these paper origami comforted him. He played with them, and it was an integral part of his childhood. It also represented the bond that he had with his mother, the connection that he had, because he would go ask for various animals to make, and his mom lovingly made it for him. So until now, his world constituted of his parents, that is especially his mom, and his paper toys. When I was 10, we moved to a new house across town. Two of the women neighbors came by to welcome us. Dad served them drinks and then apologized for having to run off to the utility company to straighten out the prior owner's bills. Make yourselves at home. My wife doesn't speak much English, so don't think she's being rude for not talking to you. So he just told the neighbors that he has some work to do, but do not consider my wife to be rude. She does not know how to speak English. While I read in the dining room, Mom unpacked in the kitchen. The neighbors conversed in the living room, not trying to be particularly quiet. He seems like a normal enough man. Why did he do that? So we all know that there are some people in the cities where they are quite judgmental. And here they are being pretty loud and being very judgmental about the choices that the husband made. Something about the mixing never seems right. So now they are talking about the biracial kid because he's half American and half Chinese. The child looks unfinished. Slanty eyes, white face, a little monster. So I don't think this is something that you would have to say in front of them, especially when the child is present there. So they are ridiculing him and belittling his appearance. Do you think he can speak English? So here they are saying that, do you think he also knows English? So if he is unable to speak English, that means they are stating that he is not good enough. The women hushed. After a while, they came into the dining room. Hello there, what's your name? Jack, I said. That doesn't sound very Chinesey. Mom came into the dining room then. She smiled at the women. The three of them stood in a triangle around me, smiling and nodding at each other with nothing to say until Dad came back because they did not know Chinese and she wasn't fluent in English. Mark, one of the neighborhood boys, came over with his Star Wars action figures. Obi-Wan Kenobi's light saber light up and he could swing his arms and say in a tiny voice, use the force. So, saber is a heavy sword with a curved blade. So, something like that. Together, we watched him repeat this performance 5 times on the coffee table. Can he do anything else? I asked. Mark was annoyed by my question. Look at all the details, he said, because until now, the young boy wasn't used to these mass-produced toys that only said one thing. He used to have this open place with his animals and they used to speak according to his imagination and he had a great time. I looked at the details. I wasn't sure what I was supposed to say. Mark was disappointed by my response. Show me your toys. So now the boy's self-esteem was hurt and he's like, oh, so you are telling my toy says only one thing, you show me your toys. I didn't have any toys except for my paper menagerie. I brought Lahu out from my bedroom. By then, he was very worn, patched all over with tape and glue. Evidence of the years of repairs Mom and I had done on him. So because Lahu was very much loved by him, the paper was quite worn out. So even if his toy, the tiger origami paper was all worn out, still they plastered it and patched it up with tape and glue and repaired it. So this shows that the mass produced goods, usually once broken, we discard them into the dustbin. But such toys, he played with them over and over again. He was no longer as nimble and sure-footed as before. I sat him down on the coffee table. I could hear the skittering steps of the other animals behind in the hallway, timidly peeking into the living room. Zhao Lao Hu, I said, and stopped. I switched to English. So, though he started in Chinese, but then he felt a sense of shame and shifted to English. This is Tiger. Cautiously, Lao Hu strode up and purred at Mark, sniffing his hands. Mark examined the Christmas wrap pattern on Lao Hu's skin. This doesn't look like a tiger at all. Your mom makes toys for you from trash? I had never thought of Lao Hu as trash, but looking at him now, he was really just a piece of wrapping paper. So now the boy started getting influenced by the outside world and he was seeking validation from them. Mark pushed Obi-Wan's head again. The lightsaber flashed. He moved his arms up and down. Use the force. Lahu turned and pounced, knocking the plastic figure off the table. So now the boy did not like the other toy because he felt the boy Mark had a superior toy. So he used his tiger to hit his toy. It hit the floor and broke, and Obi-Wan's head rolled under the couch. So this is the problem of these mass-produced expensive goods. They break very easily. Roar! Lau Hu laughed. I joined him. So he started laughing. Mark punched me hard. This was very expensive. You can't even find it in the stores now. It probably cost more than what your dad paid for your mom. This was such an insulting statement by a young boy. So it shows how what the parents speak is what is inculcated into the children. I stumbled and fell to the floor. Lau growled and leapt at Mark's face. So he started scratching Mark's face. Mark screamed more out of fear and surprise than pain. Lahu was only made of paper after all. Mark grabbed Lahu and his snarl was choked off as Mark crumpled him in his hand and tore him in half. He balled up the two pieces of paper and threw them at me. Here's your stupid, cheap Chinese garbage. So it was a huge insult to him and a huge insult to his Chinese heritage. So now he was really conscious of the difference in race. And boys of this age usually want to fit in and seek validation. So now let's see what he does after this. My fight with Mark didn't end there. Mark was popular at school. I never wanted to think again about the 2 weeks that followed. So it showed that he was bullied in school because he was of a different race and because Mark was popular. So this shows how people of different races are isolated and bullied by people. I came home that Friday at the end of the 2 weeks. Shwek Shao How Ma, mom asked, means how was school? I said nothing and went to the bathroom. I looked into the mirror. I looked nothing like her, nothing. So even if there were parts of her features in him, he was in denial. He did not want to look like her. At dinner, I asked Dad, do I have a chink face? That means, do I have a face that is Chinese? Dad put down his chopsticks. Even though I had never told him what happened in school, he seemed to understand. He closed his eyes and rubbed the bridge of his nose. No, you don't, is what his father said. Mom looked at Dad, not understanding. She looked back at me. Xiao Shink? What does chink mean? English, I said, speak English. So she tried. What happened? I pushed the chopsticks in the bowl before me away. stir-fried green peppers with 5 spice beef. We should eat American food. So now he hated his Chinese heritage. So he did not want to eat Chinese food. He did not want to even listen to Chinese, and he wanted his mother to speak in English. Dad tried to reason. A lot of families cook Chinese sometimes. We are not other families. I looked at him. Other families don't have moms who don't belong. So he himself is isolating his mother, saying that she does not belong here. So these are the alienating things that are faced by immigrants, and they find it difficult to navigate through these two worlds. He looked away and then he put a hand on Mom's shoulder. I'll get you a cookbook. Mom turned to me. Boo Hauchi, the food doesn't taste good, so she thinks that the problem is that the food doesn't taste good. But it was much more than that. English, I said, raising my voice. Speak English. So now he started getting very rude and he started hating his mother's culture and heritage. Unfortunately, the mother was facing social exclusion and isolation. Mom reached out to touch my forehead, feeling for my temperature. Fashaula, do you have a fever? I brushed her hand away. I am fine. Speak English, I was shouting. So he started getting really rude to his mother. Speak English to him, Dad said to Mom. You knew this was going to happen someday. What did you expect? So the father is also not supporting the wife, and he's saying, supporting the son, saying that yes, you have to learn English. This was meant to be. Mom dropped her hands to her sides. She sat looking from Dad to me and back to Dad again. She tried to speak, stopped and tried again and stopped again. So because she wasn't fluent in the language, she was finding it difficult to communicate. You have to, Dad said. I've been too easy on you. Jack needs to fit in. Mom looked at him. If I say love, I feel here. She pointed to her lips. If I say A, I feel here. And she put her hand over her heart. So here she shows that she does not feel comfortable in English and it does not touch her heart, or it doesn't come from her heart, and it is forced. Dad shook his head. You are in America. Mom hunched down in her seat, looking like the water buffalo when Lahu used to pounce on him and squeeze the air of life out of him. And I want some real toys. So now he was feeling the peer pressure, and out of peer pressure and desire to conform to American norms, he said that all the toys that I had until now are not real toys and I want some real toys. Dad bought me a full set of Star Wars action figures. I gave the Obi-Wan Kenobi to Mark. So the same toy that the boy said that does this only do so much? It is so boring. And now, just because of peer pressure and because he wanted to fit in, he asked for those same toys. I packed the paper menagerie in a large shoebox and put it under the bed. The next morning, the animals had escaped and taken over their old favorite spots in my room. So even if he tried to remove these thoughts from his mind, still these animals came and occupied it in his mind. So that is the relation to what he's saying, that these animals came back. I caught them all and put them back into the shoebox, tapping the lid shut. But the animals made so much noise in the box that I finally shoved it into the corner of the attic as far away from my room as possible. So he tried to shove away the memory of all these animals from his mind. If mom, and literally also he put it down in the attic. If mom spoke to me in Chinese, I refused to answer her. So he started distancing himself from his mother. because he was feeling embarrassed of her as she couldn't speak English, and he felt that because of her, he also did not fit in the society. So this reference is literally as well as metaphorically in his mind. So the rift between his mother and him had widened. After a while, she tried to use more English, but her accent and broken sentences embarrassed me. I tried to correct her. Eventually, she stopped speaking altogether if I was around. So she tried her best, but all was in vain. Mom began to mime things if she needed to let me know something. She tried to hug me the way she saw American mothers do on television. I thought her movements exaggerated, uncertain, ridiculous, graceless. So, until he came into this community, he did not feel anything was wrong with his mother. He felt that she was magical, she had a magical breath, she was amazing. But now, after what people said, he started hating his mother and felt she was ridiculous. You shouldn't treat your mother that way, Dad said. But he couldn't look me in the eye as he said it. Deep in his heart, he must have realized that it was a mistake to have tried to take a Chinese peasant girl and expect her to fit in the suburbs of Connecticut. Mom learned to cook American style. I played video games and studied French. So he is now just because he wants to fit in, he started playing video games and he studied French, and mom, to please her son, started to cook American style. Every once in a while, I would see her at the kitchen table studying the plain side of a sheet of wrapping paper. Later, a new paper animal would appear on my nightstand and try to cuddle up to me. So, she would try to make a paper animal for him because he really loved it before. But I caught them, squeezed them until the air went out of them, and then stuffed them away in the box in the attic. So here she is trying to persuade him, but he would crush anything that would remind him of the Chinese heritage. Mom finally stopped making the animals when I was in high school. By then, her English was much better. But I was already at that age when I wasn't interested in what she had to say, whatever language she used. So here, she had completely changed for him, but he ignored her completely. Dad and I stood, one on each side of mom, lying on the hospital bed. She was not yet even 40, but she looked much older. So, if you see here, she had internalized her pain of racism and isolation, and it had taken a toll on her health, and therefore she contacted cancer. So, all the pent up feelings caused a health toll. For years, she had refused to go to the doctor for the pain inside her that she carried, she said was no big deal. By the time an ambulance finally carried her in, the cancer had spread far beyond the limits of surgery. My mind was not in the room. It was the middle of the on campus recruiting season, and I was focused on resumes, transcripts, and strategically constructed interview schedules. I schemed about how to lie to the corporate recruiters most effectively so that they will offer to buy me. So once he had ridiculed his mother of how she could be bought, and now he is thinking of how he can lie his way to the recruiters so that they can buy him. And if you see here, his mother is on the deathbed and he does not feel any emotion. This shows how hard hearted he has become. I understood intellectually that it was terrible to think about this while your mother lay dying, but that understanding didn't mean I could change how I felt. So he was so emotionless That he's like, intellectually, I know that you're not supposed to think of all of this when your mother is dying, but I couldn't help it. She was conscious. Dad held her left hand with both of his own. He leaned down to kiss her forehead. He seemed weak and old in a way that startled me. I realized that I knew almost as little about dad as I did about mom. So, in short, he was so engrossed in his own life that he did not even know about his parents, about their life. Mom smiled at him. I'm fine. She turned to me, still smiling. I know you have to go back to school. Her voice was very weak, and it was difficult to hear her over the hum of the machines hooked up to her. Go. Don't worry about me. This is not a big deal. Just do well in school. So, this shows the unconditional love of parents, and especially the mother here. She's in her deathbed, but she's trying to console him, saying, you know what, I am fine. You go, I know you have to go to your school. I reached out to touch her hand because I thought that this was what I was supposed to do. So this was not out of love, but just as a duty. I was relieved. I was already thinking about the flight back and the bright California sunshine. She whispered something to Dad. He nodded and left the room. Jack? If she was caught up in a fit of coughing and could not speak for some time. If I don't make it, don't be too sad and hurt your health. Focus on your life. Just keep that box you have in the attic with you, and every year at Qingming, just take it out and think about me. I'll be with you always. So, here she's consoling him and saying that don't be too sad and don't hurt your health. Focus on your life. And the box that you have in your attic with you, she knows that he has kept it in the attic. Take it every year at Qingming and think about me. I will be there with you. You are not alone. So, here she's talking about the healing power of remembrance. So, Qingming was the Chinese festival for the dead. When I was very young, mom used to write a letter on Qingming to her dead parents back in China, telling them the good news about the past year of her life in America. She would read the letter out loud to me, and if I made a comment about something, she would write it down in the letter too. Then she would fold the letter into a paper crane and release it, facing east. We would then watch as the crane flapped its crisp wings on its long journey west towards the Pacific, towards China, towards the graves of mom's family. So this is what her mother used to do. And she says that through remembrance, by sharing good news to them and thinking about them, it is very healing. It had been many years since I last did that with her. I don't know anything about the Chinese calendar, I said. Just rest, mom. Just keep the box with you and open it once in a while. Just open. And she began to cough again. It's okay, mom. So she's trying to say something that open the box and see. But he said it's okay, and I stroked her arm awkwardly. So even caressing his own mother, he felt awkwardness in that. Hazy Mama Aini, her cough took over again. Son, mom loves you. An image from years ago flashed into my memory. Mom saying A and then putting her hand over her heart. That is love. All right, mom, stop talking. Dad came back and I said that I needed to get to the airport early because I didn't want to miss my flight. She died when my plane was somewhere over Nevada. So, though he suppressed all his emotions and past memories, he had a small recollection of his mother putting her hand over her heart and saying that only when I say love in Chinese does it really come from my heart. Dad aged rapidly after mom died. The house was too big. for him and had to be sold. My girlfriend Susan and I went to help him pack and clean the place. Susan found the shoebox in the attic. The paper menagerie, hidden in the non insulated darkness of the attic for so long, had become brittle and the bright wrapping papers had faded. So it was a lot of years and it was made during his childhood. So the paper had become brittle and the paper patterns had faded. I have never seen origami like this, Susan said. Your mom was an amazing artist. The paper animals did not move. Perhaps whatever magic had animated them stopped when mom died. Or perhaps I had only imagined that these paper constructions were once alive. The memory of children could not be trusted. So here now, the paper animals have faded and stiffened. So when he rejected his mother, it was all fade and stiff. But at the end, we will see that towards the end, that they revive and soften as he accepts his heritage. It was the first weekend in April, 2 years after mom's death. Susan was out of town on one of her endless trips as a management consultant, and I was home lazily flipping through the television channels. I paused at a documentary about sharks. Suddenly, I saw in my mind mom's hand as they folded and refolded tin foil to make a shark for me, while Lahu and I watched. A rustle. I looked up and saw that a ball of wrapping paper and torn tape was on the floor next to the bookshelf. I walked over to pick it up for the trash. The ball of paper shifted, unfurled itself, and I saw that it was Lahu, who I hadn't thought about in a very long time. Roarsa. Mom must have put him back together after I had given up. So you'd remember his friend had torn it, but his mom had used tape and fixed it. He was smaller than I remembered. Or maybe it was just that back then my fists were really small. Were smaller. Susan had put the paper animals around our apartment as decoration. She probably left Lahu in a hidden corner because he looked so shabby. I sat down on the floor and reached out a finger. Lahu's tail twitched and he pounced playfully. I laughed, stroking his back. Lahu purred under my hand. So that animal which he said was dead or did not move now was revived because he was slowly reaching out to his Chinese heritage. How have you been, old buddy? Lahu stopped playing. He got up, jumped with feline grace into my lap, and proceeded to unfold himself. In my lap was a square of creased wrapping paper, the plain side up. It was filled with dense Chinese characters. I'd never learned to read Chinese, but I knew the characters for sun, and they were at the top. So he realized that his mother had written him her letter. What would you expect them in a letter addressed to you, written in mom's awkward childish handwriting? So now he was wondering, now what is mom going to write to me? I went to the computer to check the internet. Today was Qingming, so day of remembering the dead. I took the letter with me downtown where I knew the Chinese tour buses stopped. I stopped every tourist asking, Nin Hiu Du Guangweng Ma, can you read Chinese? I hadn't spoken Chinese so long that I wasn't even sure if they understood. A young woman agreed to help. We sat down on a bench together and she read the letter to me aloud. The language that I had tried to forget for many years came back. And I felt the words sinking into me through my skin, through my bones until they squeezed tight around my heart. So all the things that he had suppressed until then all came back. It went through his skin, through his bones, and they squeezed his heart. Now we're going to go through the letter that the mother has written, and this is a very painful letter. Son, we haven't talked in a long time. You were so angry when I tried to touch you that I'm afraid. And I think maybe this pain I feel all the time now is something serious. So when she realized that the pain that she's feeling all the time is not just the internalized pain, but it is resulting in something serious. So just before she realized that she is about to die, she wrote this letter to him. So I decided to write to you. I'm going to write in the paper animals I made for you that you used to like so much. The animals will stop moving when I stop breathing. But if I write to you with all my heart, I leave a little of myself behind on this paper in these words. Then, if you think of me on Qingming, when the spirits of the departed are allowed to visit their families, you will make the parts of myself I leave behind come alive too. The creatures I made for you will again leap and run and pounce, and maybe you will get to see these words then. So, here, if you see, the animal movements are directly connected to his emotions. So, because he felt connected to his mother again, to his heritage again, and because he remembered that shark, the tiger again started moving and reviving. Because I have to write with all my heart, I need to write to you in Chinese. So, for effective communication, she had to write in the language that she was most comfortable in. All this time, I still haven't told you the story of my life. When you were little, I always thought I'll tell you the story when you were older, so you could understand. But somehow that chance never came up. So, she wanted to share her story. She wanted him to understand about her. But he hated her so much, he tried to go away from her that she never got the opportunity. I was born in 1957 in Singalo village, Hebei province. Your grandparents were both from very poor peasant families with few relatives. Only a few years after I was born, the great famines struck China, during which 30 million people died. The first memory I have was waking up to see my mother eating dirt so that she could fill her belly and leave the last bit of flour for me. This is the selfless sacrifice that mothers do, or even parents for that matter, do for their kids. Things got better after that. Singalo is famous for its Jeji paper craft, and my mother taught me how to make paper animals and give them life. This was practical magic in the life of the village. We made paper birds to chase grasshoppers away from the fields and paper tigers to keep away the mice. For Chinese New Year, my friends and I made red paper dragons. I'll never forget the sight of all those little dragons zooming across the sky overhead, holding up strings of exploding firecrackers to scare away all the bad memories of the past years. You would have loved it. So, she's talking about the most precious memories of her childhood. Then came the Cultural Revolution in 1966. Now, coming to another horrifying part. Neighbors turned on neighbors and brothers against brother. Someone remembered that my mother's brother, my uncle, had left for Hong Kong back in 1946 and became a merchant there. Having a relative in Hong Kong meant we were spies and enemies of the people, and we had to be struggled against in every way. Your poor grandmother, she couldn't take the abuse and threw herself down a well. So she committed suicide. That is her mother. Then some boys with hunting muskets dragged your grandfather away one day into the woods and he never came back. So her father was also murdered. So a little girl going through all of this is quite horrific. There I was, a 10-year-old orphan, So if you see his life, 10-year-old, he was privileged. He had his parents to love him. He had a loving mother who would make all these paper animals for him, which was the only thing that she really knew. And that was something really close to her. And look at her life. As a 10-year-old, she's already an orphan, doesn't know what to do and where to go. The only relative I had in the world was my uncle in Hong Kong. I snuck away one night and climbed onto a freight train going south. So she just knows she's heard that he's in Hong Kong. But imagine going through a large city, and where does she even find him? Down in Guangdong province a few days later, some men caught me stealing food from a field. When they heard that I was trying to get to Hong Kong, they laughed. It's your lucky day. Our trade is to bring girls to Hong Kong. So they were maybe in the flesh trade or in some kind of trade where they traded young girls for money. They hid me in the bottom of a truck along with other girls and smuggled us across the border. We were taken to a basement and told to stand up and look healthy and intelligent for the buyers. Families paid the warehouse a fee and came by to look us over and select one of us to adopt. Now, here, adopt is put in double quotes, is because adopt in the sense they are literally bought to do the household chores or any work that they desire. The Chin family picked me to take care of their two boys. I got up every morning at 4 to prepare breakfast. I fed and bathed the boys. Imagine she herself is just a mere 10-year-old little girl. I shopped for food. I did the laundry. I swept the floors. I followed the boys around and did their bidding. At night, I was locked into a cupboard in the kitchen to sleep. If I was slow or did anything wrong, I was beaten. If the boys did anything wrong, I was beaten. If I was caught trying to learn English, I was beaten. So think about the situation in her childhood when she really wanted to learn English, but she was beaten for it. So imagine her trauma with that language. Why would you want to learn English? Mr. Chin asked. You want to go to the police? We'll tell the police that you are a mainlander illegally in Hong Kong. They love to have you in their prison. So they even emotionally blackmailed her, saying that if she goes to the police, she will be put into prison. 6 years I lived like that. One day, an old woman who sold fish to me in the morning market pulled me aside. I know girls like you. How old are you now? 16? So when she got married, she was not even legally 18. One day, the man who owns you will get drunk and he will look at you and pull you to him, and you can't stop him. The wife will find out, and then you will think you really have gone to hell. You have to get out of this life. I know something who can help. So she's saying that you will be used very soon. So you will have to get out of this hell. She told me about American men who wanted Asian wives. If I can cook, clean, and take care of my American husband, he'll give me a good life. So, just for a good life, she married him. She wanted to have a happy family. It was the only hope I had. And that was how I got into the catalog with all those lies and met your father. It was not a very romantic story, but it is my story. In the suburbs of Connecticut, I was lonely. Your father was kind and gentle with me, and I was very grateful to him. But no one understood me, and I understood nothing. So, this was very isolating. Though the father was kind and gentle, she did not understand anything and nobody understood her. So her only hope to have a better life was her child, and her child was her entire life. But unfortunately, he pushed her away and hurt her immensely. But then you were born. I was so happy when I looked into your face and saw shades of my mother, my father, and myself. She was so happy because of this aspect, but that is the same aspect that her own son hated about. I had lost my entire family, all of Sigulu and everything I ever knew and loved. But there you were, and your face was proof that they were real. I hadn't made them up. So, this was the only connection to her heritage that was her son. Now I had someone to talk to. I would teach you my language, and we could together remake a small piece of everything that I loved and that I lost. When you said your first word to me in Chinese that had the same accent as my mother and me, I cried for hours. When I made the first Jeji animal for you and you laughed, I felt there were no worries in the world. Such an emotional letter by the mother. You grew up a little and now you could even help your father and me talk to each other because he knew Chinese and English and he could help his parents communicate. I was really at home now. Finally, she felt like she belonged. I finally found a good life, something that she yearned for years. I wish my parents could be here so that I could cook for them, give them a good life too. But my parents were no longer around. You know what the Chinese think is the saddest feeling in the world? It is for a child to finally grow the desire to take care of his parents, only to realize that they were long gone. And this is exactly the saddest feeling that the boy feels after reading the letter. Kids realize the profound sacrifice of their parents only after they are long gone, and by then it is too late. Son, I know that you do not like your Chinese eyes, which are my eyes. I know that you do not like your Chinese hair, which is my hair. But can you understand how much joy your very existence brought to me? And can you understand how it felt when you stopped talking to me and won't even let me talk to you in Chinese? I felt I was losing everything all over again. Why won't you talk to me, son? The pain makes me hard to write. The young woman handed the paper back to me. I could not bear to look into her face. Without looking up, I asked for her help in tracing out the character of A on the paper below mom's letter. A means love. I wrote the character again and again on the paper, in intertwining my pen strokes with her words. Finally, he was reaching out to his mother, but yes, it was too late. The young woman reached out and put a hand on my shoulder. Then she got up and left, leaving me alone with my mother. Following the creases, I refolded the paper back into Lahu. I cradled him in the crook of my arm. As she had purred, we began to walk home. Such a beautiful story that not only talks about how difficult someone's life can be, and by the time we realize it, it is too late, and we are only left with regret and remorse. And the only way to maybe heal is through remembrance and through love. Now, let's go through the various themes in the story. First is the cost of fitting in. Jack, a biracial boy, faces peer pressure and racism from the people around him. So he starts associating his mother's Chinese culture with shame and disgust. Though initially he was proud of his Chinese roots, once he is ridiculed by the people, he associates being Chinese as a source of torment and self loathing. This story illustrates the psychological damage that it creates on young children and how they get caught between the two worlds. Second is the toll of internalized racism. Jack's mother tried her best to fit in, but she was isolated by the society and also by her own child. The emotional pain that nobody understood her kept surmounting, and the pent up feelings resulted in her having cancer and dying at a very young age. Next is parental sacrifice. The mother, though pained immensely when asked to change her cultural identity, the only identity that she has, selflessly learns English and learns to cook American food just so that her son would talk to her and not feel embarrassed or disgusted by her presence. Even in her deathbed, she consoled him and asked him not to worry about her. There are many such quiet sacrifices that parents make to preserve their child's happiness. Though the child would be oblivious then, by the time they realize their folly, it would be too late. The next is mass produced items versus handmade goods. The story draws a sharp contrast to the allure that children have towards cheap, easily broken, mass produced goods to the genuine and beautifully created origami by the mother. However, the store bought, soulless consumerist goods are eventually discarded, but the ones created by hand are preserved and form a reflection of the culture, rich history of the mother, and forms a lasting connection to her even after her passing. The next is adolescent egocentrism. The little boy who considered his mother's art to be magical starts insulting his mother, ignoring her, and even form a kind of resentment towards her when he reaches adolescence. Adolescence is a phase where the teens believe that they are universally correct. They easily fall under traps of peer pressure, feel that they are superior, and push back against parental advice as they want to assert autonomy. So, this is the problem of adolescent egocentrism. The next is regret and remorse. Towards the end, after reading the letter, the boy feels deep regret for not understanding his mother and acknowledging his mother's sacrifice. Now he feels the emotional cost of lost time. Though he feels remorse now, the only way to heal was to remember and honor his mother. There was nothing else that he could do. The next is the emotional bond that wanes away. The core of the story is the emotional bond between the mother and the child, where she was the only one who could soothe him while he was sobbing. If you remember, the story starts with that. He was enchanted by his mother's ability and considered her breath magical. However, when outside validation started becoming more important, he let go of the bond with her and felt contempt towards her. But when he finally realized the unconditional love she had for him, it was too late. Next is the importance of communication. Inability to speak the same language as the people around caused the mother to experience pain, isolation, and a deep rift between the mother and the son. English to the mother felt unnatural and mechanical, not something that came from heart, and since she could not communicate effectively, she had to depart the world without pouring out her life story to him. Therefore, effective communication requires emotional vulnerability and willingness to learn each other's language. In the end, he tries to communicate with his mother by tracing the Chinese character for love many times. This shows his tragic realization of trying to connect to his mother and her culture, but long after her death. a phenomenon she referred to in her letter as the saddest feeling. And that is the end of this video. I hope you really enjoyed watching this video. Please share it among your friends and study well. I'm praying for each one of you. God bless.